The sound of fabric scissors going through 3 months of my work is a sound that does not leave a woman. It does not sound like fabric tearing. It sounds like a slow exhale, a long, sharp, mechanical sigh. And under that sigh, the soft snap of 240 hand-sewn embroidered monarch butterflies opening their wings one last time before they fall to the floor of a bedroom in Coconut Grove. My husband, Connor, was holding the scissors my grandmother brought from Mexico City in 1974. The same scissors my grandmother had used to cut the wedding dress of every bride in our family for 30 years. The same scissors I had used that morning to finish the last seam of the wedding dress my sister-in-law Vivian was supposed to wear in less than 24 hours. Connor looked me in the eye across the room. He pushed the blade into the chest of the dress, where I had sewn a single embroidered monarch butterfly with silver thread, in honor of my abuela Carmen. He pulled the scissors down. The dress opened from the chest to the waist, then from the waist to the hem. 200 hours of work, 3 months of my life. The piece I had built thinking only of how my husband's little sister was going to feel beautiful walking down the aisle of the Vizcaya Museum. Gone. He set the scissors down on my work table. He looked at me with the calmness of a man who believed he had just taught his wife a lesson. "The wedding is tomorrow," he said. "Buy something off the rack." He walked out of the room. He took his car keys. The front door closed. I stood in front of that ripped dress for 40 minutes without moving. I did not cry. I did not call anyone. I did not even pick up the pieces of silver thread that had fallen at the foot of the dress form. What my husband did not know, what he could not have possibly known when he closed that door behind him, was that one of the most powerful couture designers in the United States was already on her way to Miami. A woman who had, 3 weeks earlier, seen photographs of the dress my husband had just torn apart. A woman who was about to walk into my house and look at that destruction with the same calm I had failed to find. Her name was Mariana Reyes, and she was about to do for me what my husband had spent 4 years trying to make sure no one would ever do. But to understand how Mariana Reyes ended up in my workroom on a Friday night in Coconut Grove, I have to take you back to the morning my sister-in-law Vivian sent me a text message that began with 2 words. "Don't tell. My name is Ana Luisa Vargas. I am 38 years old now. I grew up in Little Havana in Miami, in the back of a small alteration shop on Calle Ocho that my mother, Esperanza, had opened with $700 and a borrowed sewing machine in 1993. My grandmother, Abuela Carmen, was a modista. That is the Spanish word for a woman who builds dresses by hand. In Mexico City, in the 1960s and 70s, Abuela Carmen ran a small atelier 2 blocks from the Zócalo. She built wedding dresses for the daughters of Mexican judges, businessmen, even one ambassador. She taught herself French couture techniques from books she ordered through a friend who lived in Paris. She immigrated to Miami in 1974 with a sewing machine, a pair of fabric scissors, and a leather-bound notebook of patterns. She lived with us until she died when I was 22. The notebook of patterns is in the bottom drawer of my work table in my apartment in New York. I learned to sew when I was 4 years old. I learned to embroider when I was 6. By the time I was 10, my abuela Carmen had taught me the 15 techniques of Mexican floral embroidery that her grandmother had taught her. By the time I was 12, I had built my first wedding dress for a doll my mother had bought me at the Cuban market in Hialeah. I went to the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising in Los Angeles when I was 19. I graduated when I was 22. I came back to Miami to take care of Abuela Carmen, who had been diagnosed with cancer that summer. I sat with her for the last 6 months of her life in a hospital room in Coral Gables. The day before she died, she squeezed my hand and she told me in Spanish, "Ana, the dress is the woman. Never forget." I opened my own atelier on 8th Street, 2 doors down from my mother's shop, in 2012. For 4 years, I built bridal couture for the daughters of Latin Miami. Cuban brides, Venezuelan brides, Mexican brides, Brazilian brides. By the time I was 28, I had done a fitting for a young Argentine actress whose name appears on the Met Gala step and repeat now. I met Connor Bennett the year I turned 30. Connor was a corporate attorney at one of the big firms downtown. His family was old Florida money. They had a 6-bedroom house in Naples on the Gulf Coast and a condo in Brickell. Connor was tall, blonde, polite. He wore Brooks Brothers suits. He drank old fashions. He was the kind of man my mother had warned me about for years, in the careful Spanish she used when she did not want my Cuban customers in the next room to overhear her. Connor proposed to me 11 months after we met. We got married in January of 2020. A week before the wedding, Connor took me to lunch at a quiet restaurant on Bird Road. He told me, very gently, that he had been thinking about my atelier. He told me his mother, Caroline Bennett, had hosted 30 years of Naples charity galas. He told me a woman married to a Bennett was expected to be visible in certain ways and invisible in others. He told me my schedule at the atelier was not going to be compatible with his. "Just take a year off," he said. "We'll see how we feel." I closed my atelier 2 weeks after the wedding. I told the 4 clients I was working with at the time that I was taking a hiatus. I told my mother in Spanish that I was being a wife. My mother did not say anything. She just nodded once, slowly, the way she always nodded when she had an opinion she was not going to share with me. For 4 years, I was Mrs. Bennett. I went to the Naples charity galas. I learned to make small talk with the wives of Connor's law partners. I sat through Bennett family Christmas dinners where Connor's father, Robert Bennett, would tell stories about his time at Princeton, and Connor's mother would tell me, sweetly, that she just loved my mother's little dress shop on Calle Ocho. In the basement of our house in Coconut Grove, I built dresses in secret. I built them for my cousins, for my mother's friends, for the daughters of women who used to be my mother's customers. Word spread quietly through the Cuban and Mexican community in South Florida that the granddaughter of Carmen Vargas was still working, just not on the books. By the spring of last year, I had built 31 wedding dresses in that basement. Connor never went down there. He thought I was using the room for, in his words, your hobby. He never asked to see what I was doing. The only person in his family who had ever seen my work was his little sister, Vivian. Vivian Bennett was 28 when she got engaged. She was nothing like her brother. She had spent her 20s working at a nonprofit that ran arts programs in Miami's public schools. She lived in a small apartment in Wynwood. She drove a 15-year-old Honda. She had been the only person in the Bennett family who had ever set foot inside my mother's shop on Calle Ocho. She had been the only person at our wedding rehearsal dinner who had asked me about Abuela Carmen. Vivian had seen my work. 2 years before, I had built her a small embroidered dress for her 30th birthday party. She had cried when she opened the box. Vivian got engaged in February of last year. The wedding was set for late September. The venue was the Vizcaya Museum and Gardens, the historic Italian-style mansion on Biscayne Bay, where every important Miami wedding has happened for the last 50 years. Vivian texted me in early March. The text was 4 words long. "Don't tell, make me." I called her 10 minutes later. She told me she had been thinking about it since the night I made her 30th birthday dress. She wanted me to design and build her wedding gown. She did not want her brother to know. She did not want her parents to know. She knew Connor would shut it down. She knew her parents would call it inappropriate. She wanted to walk into the Vizcaya in a dress made by her sister-in-law, in front of 300 people, in front of the cameras of every Miami social magazine in town, and tell the truth about who I was when she got to the altar. I told her yes within 30 seconds. I started the design that weekend. The vision came to me on a Sunday afternoon at my mother's kitchen table in Little Havana. We were drinking Café Cubano. My mother had pulled out Abuela Carmen's leather notebook of patterns. We were turning pages slowly. On page 41, there was a sketch my grandmother had drawn in 1968 of a wedding dress with a single embroidered monarch butterfly at the heart and a cascade of smaller butterflies down the train. The monarchs are the symbol of Mexico. They migrate from Canada to Michoacan every year, and the Mexican people believe they carry the souls of their ancestors home. My mother put her finger on the sketch. "Anna," she said, "this one. Make her this one." I built that dress over 14 weeks. I rented a small commercial sewing studio off Coral Way so I could work without having to keep moving things into the basement. I told Connor I had joined a weekly book club. He did not ask which one. The fabric came from a small mill in Lyon that my mother had ordered from once in 1996. The silver embroidery thread came from Mexico City, from a thread house that my abuela Carmen had used since 1963. I hand-embroidered 240 monarch butterflies on the bodice and the train. By the second week of September, I was 4 days out from the wedding and the dress was almost finished. I had moved it into the bedroom studio of our house in Coconut Grove for the final fittings. Vivian came over twice a week, late at night, when Connor was asleep, to try it on. The last fitting was on the Thursday night before the wedding. Vivian put the dress on at 10 in the evening. She stood in front of the antique mirror I had inherited from Abuela Carmen. She did not say anything for almost 2 minutes. Then she said, "Anna, I am not going to be able to thank you for this. There is no thank you that fits." She kissed me on both cheeks, in the way Cuban women kiss each other, and she went home to her parents' guest room in Naples to sleep before the wedding rehearsal. She left the dress on the form in my workroom. The wedding was set for Saturday. Friday morning, Vivian had posted a story on Instagram, a close-up of the embroidered bodice. No tag, no caption, just the silver thread on white silk and the soft curve of one monarch butterfly. Connor saw the story before I did. He was at his office downtown when his mother called him. Caroline Bennett had recognized the embroidery in the photo. She told her son, on the phone, that she had a feeling his wife had been more involved in the wedding than he had let on. She asked Connor, in the polite voice she used when she was trying to ruin somebody's day, what he was going to do about it. Connor came home for lunch. He walked into the bedroom studio at 12:30 on Friday afternoon. I was sitting at my work table, tightening a silver thread on the back of the bodice. The dress was on the dress form, 3 feet from where I was sitting. The afternoon sun was coming in through the bay window. Connor stopped in the doorway. He looked at the dress on the form for a long, full minute. He did not say hello. He did not take off his suit jacket. He did not put down his briefcase. He said, "When did you start this?" "Connor, we can talk about this. Sit down." "When, Anna?" 3 months ago, Vivian asked me. She did not want anyone in the family to know until tomorrow. It was supposed to be a surprise. A surprise. Yes. You went behind my back. For 3 months. You used my sister to get back into the work I asked you to stop doing. Connor, it is one dress. It is for your sister. He walked toward the work table. He picked up my grandmother's fabric scissors, the same scissors that had cut every wedding dress in my family since 1974. I stood up. "Connor, put those down. I asked you to stop. 4 years ago. We had a conversation. You agreed. And you have been spending every Tuesday and Thursday night of our marriage in some studio you did not even tell me you rented. Connor, please. The wedding is tomorrow. Vivian needs this dress. Put the scissors down." He walked over to the dress form. He raised the scissors to the bodice. He looked at me across the room. He pushed the blade through the embroidered chest of the dress. He pulled the scissors down. The silver thread snapped. The silk separated from the lining. 240 monarch butterflies came open like a wound from sternum to hem. He brought the scissors up again and ran them across the waist of the train. The skirt came apart. He set the scissors back down on my work table. The dress was destroyed. Every hour of my work was on the floor of our bedroom. Connor turned to face me. "The wedding is tomorrow. Buy something off the rack. I do not want my sister wearing your work in front of 300 of my colleagues." He picked up his car keys off the dresser. He left. I heard the front door close. I heard the engine of his Range Rover start. I heard him drive out of the gate of our subdivision. I sat on the floor of the bedroom for a long time. I did not cry. I think I was waiting for my body to figure out how to react to something my mind had not finished processing. At 4:15, my phone buzzed. It was Vivian. On my way for the final pickup. Be there in 20. I stared at the message for 2 minutes. Then I picked up the phone and I texted her back. Don't come yet. Something happened. She arrived in 11 minutes. She walked into the bedroom studio. She saw the dress in pieces on the floor. She saw me sitting on the work stool with my hands in my lap. She did not say anything for 10 seconds. Then she said, "Where is Connor?" "He left." "Did he do this?" "Yes." Vivian was 28 years old. She had grown up in the same house as Connor Bennett. She had spent her whole childhood navigating the moods of an older brother who had been told from the day he was born that the world existed to support him. She did not look surprised by what was on the floor. She just walked across the room. She picked up the bodice of the dress. She held it for a moment. Then she took her phone out of her purse. She called somebody. The phone rang twice. "Mariana, it's Vivian. Are you in Miami yet? My brother just destroyed Ana Luisa's work. The dress is in pieces. The wedding is tomorrow. I need you. Please." She listened for 10 seconds. She said, "Coconut Grove. I will text you the address. Hurry." She put the phone down. She looked at me. "Ana, Mariana Reyes is on her way. She will be here in 40 minutes. Get up." "We are going to fix this." I had heard the name Mariana Reyes before. Every woman in the Latin couture world had heard the name Mariana Reyes. Mariana was 62 years old. She had been born in Havana, immigrated to Miami in 1963 when she was an infant, moved to New York at 22 to apprentice under a French couturier who had once worked with Cristobal Balenciaga. She had founded Reyes Couture in 1987 on Madison Avenue. By 2025, her atelier had dressed 3 first ladies of Latin American countries, 2 Oscar-winning actresses, and the daughter of a sitting United States senator. She was the most important Latina couturier alive. She was also, as Vivian explained while we waited for her to arrive, an old friend of Vivian's mother. Caroline Bennett had bought a dress from Mariana for the Naples Symphony Gala in 2001. They had stayed in touch for 25 years. Mariana had agreed to fly down to Miami for Vivian's wedding because she had heard that her old friend's daughter was getting married, and she had heard, through a mutual acquaintance, that the dress was something special. She had not known who had built it. Vivian had texted Mariana a photograph of the dress 3 weeks earlier, the same photograph Connor had used to recognize the work. Mariana had texted her back 2 words. "Who made this?" Vivian had told her. Mariana had told Vivian, very calmly, that she was looking forward to meeting Ana Luisa Vargas at the wedding. Mariana arrived in Coconut Grove at 5:20 in the afternoon. She was wearing a navy linen suit and pearl earrings. She walked into the bedroom studio with the calmness of a woman who had spent 40 years walking into rooms where things had gone wrong. She did not speak to me for the first 10 seconds. She walked over to the dress form. She picked up the bodice. She turned it over in her hands. She looked at the silver thread. She looked at the embroidered monarch butterflies. She looked at the inside of the seam, where the hand stitching was tight and even and impossibly small. She put the bodice down. She turned to me. "Ana, my name is Mariana Reyes. We are going to spend the next 18 hours in this room. Tomorrow morning, your sister-in-law is going to walk down the aisle of the Vizcaya in this dress, and the dress is going to be more beautiful than it was before he touched it. Do you have a fresh bolt of the silk?" I nodded. "Do you have the silver thread?" I nodded. "How many of the monarch butterflies are intact?" I walked to the floor. I picked up 4 of the embroidered butterflies. They had come off the bodice clean. 2 were torn. 2 were not. "Show me your work table," she said. We worked through the night. Mariana taught me a French technique called point d'arrêt, which is a way of anchoring a torn seam from the inside so that the repair is invisible from the outside. She had learned the technique in Paris in 1983. She taught me the technique on a piece of scrap silk for 40 minutes before we tried it on the dress. She did the first 3 repairs herself. She watched me do the 4th. She nodded once. After that, we worked side by side. At 3 in the morning, my mother arrived. Vivian had called her. My mother walked into the bedroom studio carrying a thermos of café cubano and a dish of pastelitos. She kissed Mariana on both cheeks. She kissed me on the forehead. She sat down at the work table next to Mariana, picked up a needle, and started reattaching the embroidered butterflies one by one. The 3 of us, me, my mother, and Mariana Reyes, finished the dress at 6:40 in the morning. The dress was, in some way I cannot fully explain, more beautiful than it had been before. Mariana had insisted around midnight that we add one detail to the seam where Connor had cut the bodice, a single monarch butterfly in silver thread with its wings opening across the line of the cut, a scar that had become embroidery. Vivian arrived at 7. She put the dress on. She stood in front of the mirror. She did not cry. She just looked at me in the reflection. Anna, he is going to know what happened. Today. In front of everybody. I want him to. Mariana put her hand on my shoulder. Querida, we will talk after the wedding. There is a lot to talk about. The wedding started at 4 in the afternoon at the Vizcaya Museum. 300 guests. The bay was on the south side of the venue. The cocktail hour happened in the courtyard. The ceremony itself took place in the salon of the historic mansion. Vivian came down the aisle on her father's arm. Connor was in the 3rd row of folding chairs in a navy suit sitting next to his mother. Caroline Bennett saw the dress. Her eyes moved across the embroidery. They moved to the silver thread. They moved to the line of the cut where the new monarch butterfly had been added. Caroline turned and looked at her son. I do not know what passed between them. I was watching from the back of the room. But Connor's face changed in that 1 second. The reception started at 6 in the evening in the great hall of the Vizcaya. Cocktails, toasts, dancing. At 7:15, Vivian stood up at the head table. She tapped a fork against her champagne glass. The room went quiet. 300 people turned to look. I want to introduce you all to the woman who designed and built this dress. I was sitting at a side table with Mariana, my mother, and an empty chair where Connor had been told to sit. He was, in that moment, somewhere on the back terrace. My sister-in-law, Ana Luisa Vargas, is the granddaughter of Carmen Vargas, who was a master modista in Mexico City for 28 years. Ana Luisa trained at the Fashion Institute in Los Angeles. For 4 years, she has been running a private couture practice out of the basement of a house in Coconut Grove, building wedding dresses for women in this city who deserve more than the world tells them they deserve. She has built 31 of those dresses. This dress is the 32nd. She built it in 3 months. Yesterday, 24 hours before this wedding, somebody in this family destroyed this dress with a pair of fabric scissors. Ana Luisa, my mother's friend Mariana Reyes, and Ana Luisa's mother Esperanza Vargas reconstructed this dress in 18 hours. Everything beautiful in this room tonight survived something. She looked across the room at Connor, who had returned to the side door of the great hall. Everything beautiful in this room tonight survived you. Connor walked out of the wedding. His parents did not follow him. A few minutes later, Mariana stood up. She walked to the head of the room. She took the microphone from Vivian. My name is Mariana Reyes. Some of you know my work. Some of you do not. I have spent 40 years of my life looking for the next woman who is going to build clothes the way my teacher's teacher used to build them in Paris in 1948. I want to announce tonight that Ana Luisa Vargas is joining Reyes Couture in New York as the head designer of our bridal collection. She starts in Manhattan in 2 weeks. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, you are looking at the next great American couturier. The room rose to its feet. 300 people clapped for 38 seconds. I know the number because Vivian counted later. I moved to New York 11 days after the wedding. I lived for the first 3 months in a small apartment Mariana had arranged for me in the West Village. By the end of my first year at Reyes Couture, I had designed 41 wedding gowns under the Reyes label. By the end of my second year, Mariana had launched a sub-label inside Reyes called Vargas Bridal. The first capsule collection sold out in 6 weeks. The second collection was carried by Bergdorf Goodman, Saks Fifth Avenue, and one boutique in Mexico City that had been the original location of my Abuela Carmen's atelier. The dress that Vivian wore at the Vizcaya appeared on the cover of Vogue Bridal in the spring issue of last year. The cover headline was, "The Dress That Survived Everything." The article inside told the story of the scissors, the 18 hours, the monarch butterflies, the new butterfly that had been added across the cut. Hulu released a documentary about me in October of last year. It is called The Dress. It is 64 minutes long. It tells the entire story. Connor Bennett is named in the documentary. Vivian, Mariana, my mother, and I all gave them permission. The divorce went through last summer. Connor had hired a lawyer who had told him he could claim half of every contract I signed during our marriage. My lawyer, a woman in Brickell named Dolores Salazar, dismantled that argument inside a single deposition. She had documentation of the moment Connor had asked me to close my atelier in 2020. She had documentation of the 4 years of separate financial accounts that Connor himself had insisted on. She had a copy of the Hulu documentary. She brought it to the deposition. Connor's lawyer dropped the case 3 weeks later. Connor lost his job at the law firm in Miami in the spring after the documentary was released. The official reason was a restructuring. The unofficial reason, according to a friend of mine who still works downtown, was that 2 of his most important clients had asked the firm to reassign their accounts after they had watched the Hulu documentary. Connor moved back to Naples to live with his parents. His parents had stopped speaking to him for almost 3 months after the wedding. Vivian has not spoken to him at all. I have a flagship store now. It opened last fall on Madison Avenue, in a small townhouse on the east side of the street. The sign on the door says, Vargas, New York, in silver thread embroidery on a panel of white silk that Mariana herself had stretched for the opening night. The store has 4 floors. The ground floor is the bridal salon. The second floor is ready to wear. The third floor is the workroom. The 4th floor is my apartment. 2 months ago, on a Tuesday afternoon in February, a man walked into the bridal salon. He was wearing a gray suit. He had put on weight. His hair had thinned. He was holding a small leather portfolio that I recognized from our marriage, the same one he had carried to depositions during our divorce. I was standing behind the front counter, going over the order list for the spring season with my associate manager. The man stopped at the counter. He did not look up. "I'm here to look at dresses for my fiancée," he said. "I think you might know her." I looked at him. He looked at me. It was Connor. He had not seen me in 7 months. He had aged 5 years in those 7 months. "Welcome to Vargas, New York," I said. "Do you have an appointment?" "Anna, Sir, the salon is by appointment only. My associate can take down your information. We will follow up with availability." "Anna, please." "My name is Mrs. Vargas. If you do not have a current appointment, I am going to ask you to step back from the counter." He stood there for another second. He nodded once. He turned around. He walked out of my store. He has not been back. Today, I am writing this from the workroom on the 3rd floor of my building on Madison Avenue. The window is open. The leather notebook of patterns my Abuela Carmen brought from Mexico City in 1974 is sitting on my work table. The fabric scissors my grandmother used for 30 years are in the 2nd drawer. I do not use those scissors anymore. I bought a new pair last year. I keep my grandmother's pair in the drawer for sentimental reasons. They have a small chip in the blade now, where Connor pushed them into the silk of the bodice. The chip is not a flaw. It is the place where the dress was born twice. Mariana Reyes comes into my atelier every Friday afternoon. She is 65 years old now. She brings me cafe cubano in a small glass, and we talk through whatever client I am working with that week. Last Friday, she sat across from me at the work table and she said, "Querida, some scars do not heal, they become embroidery." I wrote that line down. I am going to put it on the inside hem of my next bridal collection. There are men who tear what they cannot understand, and there are women who learn to weave the tears back into something more beautiful than what they started with. My grandmother told me, the day before she died, that the dress is the woman. She did not tell me then that the woman is also the dress, that what gets cut into us, we sew back into our skin in silver thread, that the seam is the story, that the scar is the embroidery, and that some marriages do not end in divorce. Some marriages end in a workroom at 5 a.m. with 3 women, a thermos of cafe cubano, and the slow, careful work of putting back together what one man could not stand to see whole.